Hello everybody, how are you? This is Tom McCaffrey. This video I'm going to talk a little bit more about the movie Nope. I just saw this again. I wanted to see it again in IMAX. And I picked up a lot more the second time. There are a lot of things I missed. It was a little more clear. But I did notice there were things that still kind of bothered me about it. But here's some questions I still have after seeing Nope for the second time. Okay. The first question I have, and before I go on, there's going to be spoilers, so if you don't want to know what happens in Nope, then say nope to the rest of this. Okay, so first of all, I think one of the main problems I have with this movie is it's very Jaws-ish in terms of like suspense and tension. Basically, they discover there's a monster that's going to kill them. And in Jaws, they do a very good job of establishing that if you go into the ocean, this thing is very likely going to get you, no matter how far out in the ocean you go. They do a very good job of establishing that, like because in Jaws early on, there's like a couple. I think one of the first. I haven't seen Jaws in a while, but I think the first scene is a shark attack, is a woman getting eaten by a shark in the middle of the ocean at night. Then there's a couple of other, there's another scene at the beach where this guy gets killed, and Roy Scheider's son almost gets killed. And then there's another scene where they establish these guys aren't even very far out, like they're basically like right off their dock, and the shark almost kills them. So they make it really clear, like if you go into the ocean, you're probably going to get killed. In this, the ocean is the sky; it's the opposite end, and he discovers that the monster is in the sky. But he doesn't do a good job of establishing that there's like an imminent threat with this, because at the beginning of the movie, his dad gets killed because of stuff flying from the sky. You don't know what it is, and I think he's told that it's debris from an airplane, but you find out later that it was the alien throwing up or expelling various debris from people it's eaten. And so I guess Coin comes down and kills the dad, which isn't, again, when I first saw it the first time, he does things in this movie so quickly. Like there's very important, it's good, but it's bad because he does this thing where it's like very important plot points that you need to understand and get. He''ll just kind of like throw in really quickly. Like when I saw it this time, you see an X-ray of the dad's skull, and you see like an object that looks like a coin in his head. Like I guess it like went into his brain and killed him. And then the next shot is like a nickel in a bag, like almost like an evidence bag that the son keeps. But that's like really quick, and I didn't really notice it until the second time. But so then 6 months after the dad dies from the alien expelling the debris, is when he first discovers or has the discovery about what he thinks is a UFO, but that's an alien life. But my question, because he's like, oh, there's a cloud over there, and it's clearly using that cloud as its shield. It's hiding in that cloud. But my question is, so what's been going on for 6 months? So you've been living here, and this alien being has been living in a cloud, literally like right above where you live, and it hasn't tried to kill you. You haven't noticed it at all. So that right there was a problem, because like I said, it's very similar to Jaws in terms of like the tension and the the danger that you're supposed to feel, because eventually you're supposed to feel like, oh my god, if they're even within the vicinity of this cloud or this being, it's going to kill them. And that's how it is in Jaws. You always feel like if anyone is ever in the water, they're dead immediately. But in this, you're kind of like, well, I mean, is it really that? It doesn't seem like it's really targeting them, because it's had 6 months to kill them because they're right there. It hasn't done anything, so it doesn't feel very like much of a threat until later. And that's kind of an unanswered question. That's kind of what bothered me about it. It didn't really establish very well that they really are in danger from this thing all the time. It felt very like, well, sometimes they're in danger, I guess, if they go outside and it sees them. So that was a big problem I had. So And then a big thing that no one really, addresses. They don't really even address it in the movie. Is that Daniel Kaluuya's name in the movie is Otis Jr. and everyone calls him OJ. And that's, obviously that's a very like loaded name, and it's kind of supposed to be. It's like that wasn't an accident. He Jordan Peele does that in Us. There's an OJ reference in Us. The woman from Mad Men, I forgot her name, and the guy from Tim and Eric, I forgot his name. Basically, a snooty like rich couple, and she's kind of afraid that someone's outside in the dark, and he's like, "Oh, I see him. It's OJ." So it's a very deliberate reference to OJ Simpson, and I think in Us it makes sense. In Us, there's a black family that's kind of acclimated itself into, I guess, like what you would consider like the white community, and Us is more about, I think, race and class and kind of the luck of the draw of like where you end up in society. It determines a lot in whether or not you succeed in life. It's very like, and kind of how in the U.S. I think that's why it's called Us, because I think it's supposed to be United States. That it's you're really at the mercy of where you're born and your surroundings. So, and that you kind of have to like do awful things sometimes to get ahead. Things that are kind of like maybe not the most ethical choices. So I do think the OJ reference there really makes sense, because I do think it's kind of a commentary on how OJ had acclimated himself into the white community and kind of transcended race, and then later was ousted from the white community after, it was clear that he murdered, Nicole and Ron Goldman. So it's kind of like, oh, wait, we considered you like part of our community. We didn't really see your race, but now that you murdered white people, like, get out of here. It was kind of like interesting that he made an OJ reference. So in this, making the main character OJ is really interesting because, the whole thing of it is that it's about spectacle and being obsessed with spectacle, especially now with like, camera, like iPhones and camera phones and social media and YouTube and TikTok. Everyone's just obsessed with like everything you see is a spectacle now. Like you go online and like if you go on like Instagram, that it didn't used to be like this. Like videos will just start playing now. So like you'll be scrolling, and then all of a sudden there will just be like people beating each other up and it's really hard to not pay attention to these things because they're so eye catching, and they're just so like compelling to see. You get caught up in the spectacle. And then there's a part in the movie, it's such a wink, where Daniel Kaluuya's OJ character is riding on a Bronco, really going really quickly, being chased on a Bronco. OJ being chased on a Bronco. So it's kind of like, obviously a commentary on that spectacle of OJ in the Ford Bronco and the car chase. And I didn't catch it the first time. But when you think about it, that whole OJ thing, especially the Ford Bronco, that was almost like the very first viral spectacle news event that I can really remember. That was I feel like it was like after OJ was the beginning of everyone just being like addicted to these spectacle, like true crime spectacles. And I, just kind of, there were things before that, but that was like the big one. That was like the case of the century. And it was such a fucking spectacle. So it's really interesting that he names the character OJ, because it's kind of like represents like the very first spectacle that all grabbed all of our attention. And also it's odd because in the movie, the character OJ is a really he's like the most likable guy in the movie. The other people in the movie aren't as likable. So that's an interesting thing. And then another thing about it that I noticed is, I guess, one thing that kind of bothered me is when Daniel Kaluuya's character figures out that the alien, the way to not get eaten by it or consumed by it is to not look at it, which I think is a very direct commentary on social media and spectacle. The only way to avoid getting eaten up by it and consumed by it is to not pay attention to it, which really is true because that's kind of a big thing going on with social media. Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. It's just you get caught. They talk about it now, like you get caught up in these wormholes where they just like it is kind of like I think the alien is supposed to be kind of like a smart being that does things to try and get people to pay attention to it as the movie goes on. It like changes form to look even more of like a spectacle, so that you have to pay attention to it and look at it so that it can consume you. But it's like that, TikTok and Instagram, it's like if you don't look at it and you don't pay attention to it, it can't get you. That's the only way to not get consumed by it. But also that's a big theme throughout it, because he's an animal wrangler, and he doesn't. It's made very clear that he doesn't relate to people very well, because he's very like socially awkward, and he's kind of like always mumbling, and he won't look people in the eye. But animals, he has a really strong connection with, and he really understands animals and how to treat animals and what they respond to. So he seems to be the only one in the movie that actually pays attention to animals and respects them enough and their boundaries and their feelings and emotions, so that he can sense when an animal is on edge or is uncomfortable. Because there's a scene where they're shooting a commercial, and no one on the commercial is respecting him or the horse that he's wrangling. They're just kind of like turn it around, the horse. And he's like, well, I think it needs a break. And they're like, look, we need to shoot now. So it's and then the animal snaps and kicks someone, and everyone's just kind of like, oh. So it's kind of like, that's a big theme of the movie is, I don't know if it's Hollywood specifically, but I think it's a commentary, not just Hollywood, but like, well, Hollywood definitely is like, there's a lack of respect for, not just animals, but things that they deem kind of like less worthy than themselves, because they see animals not as like a real thing that they need to work with and respect, but just kind of like another object that they need to manipulate. Like, well, get the horse over here. It's not like a real thing. It's just kind of like, it's not a real animal that needs to be respected and treated well. It's just kind of another commodity. And so that happens throughout the movie. It's the theme of it, like with the chimp in the Gordy's Home TV show. They're all kind of exploiting this chimp, and none of them are really respecting it. They're just kind of using it to get what they want, and they're acting like it's part of it, but they're really using the chimp to make a spectacle. That's kind of the whole idea of the show. Like, look, there's a chimp. It's being very disrespectful to the chimp and kind of making a joke out of him. But at the end, it's kind of like, look, be careful, because these things that you're not taking seriously can turn on, they're dangerous, and they can turn on you at any second and kill you and ruin your life. So kind of in that way, it kind of reminded me a little bit of like, I mean, I don't know if this is a great analogy, but when I watched The Sopranos, one thing I really liked, I was like, when The Sopranos started, it was about the mafia, but it was kind of done at first in like almost like a humorous tone. It was like a humorous take on the mafia a little bit. Like, it was almost like meta a little bit, because it kind of showed the mafia in a different way. It was like behind the scenes where they were kind of like, goofy, and they were funny a little bit, and they were really likable. And usually that's not how they were portrayed. They were portrayed very like they're always angry and violent and mad, but you would kind of see a different side where like they were kind of like dorky at times and yeah, likable. But then what started to happen later, I think the producers and the creators were like, they did some episodes where they get really violent out of nowhere. They do these like horribly violent things. And I remember everyone was like outraged. They were like, all these people were like, writing things about how violent The Sopranos had become and how horrible the characters were. And I think it was kind of the creators being like, it's a show about the mafia. It's like, don't forget, these are like bad people, like they're murderers. So yeah, I mean, they can be funny and stuff and likable, but don't turn your back on them, because these are bad dudes. They'll turn on you at any second. And I think that happens a lot in Sopranos, which was really cool, because it was very, in The Sopranos, it was very, the way it was portrayed was like, these people in the mafia are living amongst everybody. So you can interact with them like at schools and stuff, and you can see them at like PTA events, and they can be really friendly and likable. You can be friends with them, but remember, don't mess with them. Because there's one really good episode where like one of the parents of another kid from school is friends with Tony, and then he kind of gets involved with like a gambling poker night that Tony puts together, and he basically owes Tony money, and then he's like, oh, whatever, I'll just pay you whatever, we're friends. And Tony's like, no, we're not. Like, this isn't a friend thing. Like, I will destroy your life if you don't pay me. So I think that's kind of like an interesting thing of like, yeah, these animals, yeah, they're cute and everything, and like you can kind of use them for this and that, but they're animals, so don't fuck with them, because if you piss them off, they don't know this Hollywood shit. They can just kind of go animal on you. And so, like I said, OJ is like the only one that really respects the animals throughout the movie, because he really like knows them. And so he's the only one that like knows how to, doesn't really get sucked in by the monster, because everyone else is just, especially the guy, Jupe, the kid, used to be the kid actor. He gets so wrapped up in the spectacle and staring at it and looking at it that he gets consumed by it, just like everyone else, because he doesn't really take it seriously, and he kind of is messing with it in a way that it shouldn't be messed with. Because it's also kind of like, I think maybe that could explain like that the alien isn't necessarily an evil being, it's just a predator, and maybe it wasn't targeting Daniel Kaluuya just because I don't know why. But then when his sister kind of like starts playing loud music and is sort of like, like provoking a little bit, that's when it becomes aware of it. It's like a predator, so it's got to establish its dominance. So basically, this has been going a little long. I'm going to end this. But yeah, those were all the things I wanted to say about Nope. Please like this video if you like it, and please subscribe, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.